This debate started with Medicaid and food stamps, then somehow turned into DOGE, deportations, fossil fuels, NPR, PBS, censorship, Joe Biden, and the entire administrative state. That is not a budget debate, that is a political escape room. Ilhan Omar says this bill cuts help for the poor to reward the rich. Brandon Gill says it cuts waste, fraud, and abuse. So here is the real question. Is this government cleanup, or are they using fraud to make Medicaid and SNAP cuts sound patriotic? Stay with me, because this clip shows exactly how Washington changes the subject before you notice who pays. This is beyond the headlines. Here is the setup. This is Ilhan Omar versus Brandon Gill in a debate over a major reconciliation package. Sounds boring, right? That is why Washington loves it, because inside one boring bill, they can pack tax cuts, spending cuts, immigration funding, energy policy, military money, and enough talking points to power cable news for a week. Omar's argument is simple. Medicaid and SNAP get cut. Wealthy Americans get rewarded. Gill's argument is also simple. This is about waste, fraud, abuse, tax relief, border security, energy, the military, and DOGE. So one side says, this hurts the poor. The other side says, this fixes the government. And that is why this clip matters. Because in politics, the words are never accidental. Cuts become reform. Tax breaks become growth. And people losing help becomes fighting fraud. Now watch the full exchange. No interruptions. Then we'll break down what was said, what was dodged, and what they hoped you would miss.
This reconciliation package proposes devastating cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. My Republican colleagues will tell you that they are just going after waste, fraud, and abuse, but let's be clear. The only way to slash this much safety net spending is by making it harder for people to survive. Let's call it what it is. It is the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in U.S. history. And for what? So that your billionaire friends can get nearly $300,000 in tax cuts? This is not a serious budget. This is a green light for authoritarianism, for inequality to run rampant. It is a police state budget wrapped in billionaire tax cuts.
For decades, the administrative state has been weaponized against the American people. We can give example after example of flagrant abuses of American taxpayer dollars. Our own federal government is using taxpayer dollars to promote ideologies that tens of millions of Americans find utterly repulsive. This reconciliation bill, I believe, will balance. It will extend the Trump tax cuts for the working class so that they don't experience the biggest tax increase in American history, and it'll grow the economy. But of course, it will also help us to implement the Trump agenda, which is to clean up the chaos and destruction that Joe Biden unleashed on our country over the past 4 years. It will help us fund the mass deportation of illegal aliens who have been murdering and pillaging American citizens. It will help us unleash our fossil fuel energy sector, and it will allow us to rebuild our military. And of course, it will help us implement DOGE, which this amendment targets, among other things. As DOGE has been rolled out, I think it's been a bit curious because I found that so many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have not been upset about the waste, fraud, and abuse that this process has uncovered. Rather, they've been angry that the fraud has been exposed at all. We found that, and of course, we also know that our taxpayer dollars have been going to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars every year to fund left-wing media outlets like NPR and PBS, paying for welfare for illegal aliens, and paying for giving out payments to international organizations that are censoring and pushing for the censorship of American citizens.
Okay, that was not a debate. That was a budget bill wearing 6 Halloween costumes. Ilhan Omar's argument is simple. Medicaid and SNAP get cut. The wealthy get tax benefits. Poor people get paperwork. Brandon Gill's argument is also simple. No. Okay, this is waste, fraud, abuse, Trump tax cuts, border security, fossil fuels, military strength, DOGE, NPR, PBS, censorship, and probably the last season of your favorite show. Now that is the pivot. When the question is, will people lose healthcare or food assistance? The answer becomes, do you hate fraud, America, and low gas prices? That is very subtle indeed. Now, here is the fact check. CBO says the law reduces in-kind benefits mainly through Medicaid and SNAP. KFF estimates roughly $911 billion in federal Medicaid reductions over 10 years. CBPP cites CBO estimating nearly $187 billion in SNAP cuts. So this is not just vibes, this is not just Ilhan Omar being dramatic for the camera. There are real cuts in the math. Now, Republicans say the goal is waste, fraud, and abuse. Fair. Fraud should be investigated, waste should be cut, abuse should be stopped. Wonderful. Everybody agrees. That phrase is so safe it should come with a helmet. But here is the problem. Fraud is the word politicians use when they want cuts to sound like a police raid instead of a paperwork trap. Because the public imagines criminals stealing benefits. They do not imagine a working parent losing help because the rules changed. They do not imagine someone missing a renewal notice and getting kicked off coverage. They do not imagine bureaucracy doing the dirty work while politicians call it reform. That is the magic trick. Call it fraud, cut the program, blame the victim, then say you saved America. And on tax cuts, the White House says this protects workers from a major tax hike. That is their strongest argument. But CBO also says resources go down for households near the bottom and up for households in the middle and top. Translation, some people get relief, some people get hit. And the people getting hit usually do not have lobbyists, accountants, or a yacht named fiscal responsibility. So the real question is not, is there fraud? Of course there is fraud. There is fraud everywhere money exists. The real question is, are you cutting fraud or are you cutting people? Because those are not the same thing. So here's the takeaway. Washington does not call cuts cuts, it calls them reform. It does not call tax breaks, it calls them growth. And it does not say people may lose help. It says, we are fighting fraud. That is the language game. One side says this hurts the poor and helps the rich. The other side says this cleans up government. But the receipt question is simple. Who loses benefits? Who gets tax relief? And who changes the subject before the math arrives? Drop your take in the comments. Is this real reform or just waste, fraud, and abuse doing PR for Medicaid and SNAP cuts? Agree or disagree? Tell me why. And subscribe to Beyond the Headlines. Because here, we do not just play the clip, we follow the money.